you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, Moses Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com, thechrisvossshow.com. Welcome to the big show, my family and friends, to the Chris Voss Show family, the family that loves you but doesn't judge you. The podcast that hosts billionaires, CEOs, entrepreneurs, and newsmakers, and all the hottest, newest authors to come on the show and talk shop to make you smarter, more sexier, more brilliant, more mindful. And, you're going to walk away from the show going, darn it, I know almost everything there is to know. There's over 15 years of podcasting that you can take and do. We just got done doing 655 podcasts in the last year. What more do you people want from me, damn it? Anyway, this is the guilt and shaming part where we lead into why you should refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Because, you want them to be as smart as you do in the upcoming holiday season when you have to sit around that Thanksgiving table and they start talking shop like politics or, I don't know, conspiracy theories, or they start talking about, I don't know, the fact that the earth isn't flat, it's square, whatever their shtick is, man, you're going to have to put up with that. So if you haven't listened to the Chris Voss Show, you might not have that problem, or you might have more of it. I don't know. Pick your wheel. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, youtube.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, and TikTok, Chris Voss 1. We're trying to be cool over there. We have an amazing gentleman on the show, and I'm excited to talk with him today. He's actually a retired captain of U.S. Navy ships, and I love our military because the leadership, of course, is my wheelhouse, and what they teach our military folks on leadership is just astounding, and I always find it fascinating. We've had a number of other captains from the U.S. military on the show, and all of those people. So we love having them on the show. We love appreciating them for their service. We're going to be talking to him about his amazing books, and he's got a new one coming out and a few other ones we'll be talking about. His latest one is called $1 Million Influence: How to Drive Powerful Decisions Through Language, Leverage, and Leadership. Gene Moran is on the show with us today. He'll be talking to us about this amazing book and his other books and what he's got coming up, and kind of the State of the Union, as you were. He is the president of Capital Integration, an award-winning defense lobbyist and consultant. He's a retired Navy captain and former corporate lobbyist. He now guides companies through the complexities of federal sales, and his client results measure in billions, as what's his face used to say, the scientist, of dollars. Gene's initiatives have been implemented by Congress, the president, and the executive branch. They like him over there. He's got a PhD in public policy focused on Congress and defense, and he commanded Navy ships and led global congressional delegations, joint staff during 9/11 and the aftermath, and former congressional staffer. Welcome to the show, Gene. How are you?
Chris, thanks for having me. I'm doing great. Great to be here. There you go.
It's wonderful to have you. Thank you very much, sir. Give us your .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
GeneMoran.com will take you to everything that I do.
There you go. So let's lead off with your book, $1 Million Influence. I know there's a new one. When is the new one coming out so we can get a tad up on that?
Sure. The next one comes out in November. That one is called Government Deals Are Funded, Not Sold. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about $1 Million Influence here for a minute. That was last November. I co-wrote that with Alan Weiss. Alan is a globally recognized business consultant. I'm a recognized and award-winning lobbyist and expert in the defense part of the federal government. And we recognized that we had a lot of information between us about how people miss opportunities to exercise influence that is immediately within their reach. And they sit on the sidelines and assume a position of frustration as opposed to exercising influence that they could.
There you go. And this is important for companies that want to do business with the government, want to influence them. I want to influence a few people over there, mainly for them to leave my job. You want to see my Mitch McConnell impression?
Bring it on.
That's about it. I don't want to do the full 30
It goes
seconds per
quiet,
minute.
huh?
That's it. Yeah. You
It-
just stand at the screen and just go numb, which is interesting. Anyway,
well,
people listening to this on the podcast
we
and go,
can
what
talk
happened?
about the age of some of my congressional audiences if we want. But
There you go. We'll get into it. Let's first dig into your book. Give us a 30,000 overview of the book, Million Dollar Influence, and what's inside, if you would.
yeah, what's inside? It's about 120 pages of golden nuggets drawn from experience of engaging audiences around the world. Alan Weiss is as I said, expert business consultant, worked with top countries with both U.S. and global footprints, public, private, you name it. My focus is on the Washington arena, executive branch, Congress, Senate, so that executive branch is big. I try to focus on defense. Sometimes that brings me to the White House, but
Mhm.
what we collectively recognized was that a lot of people really don't even know how to approach these situations that make them a little uncomfortable. They never quite figure out how to deal with ambiguity, so they come up with a script. They rely on a script, and when real life makes contact with that script, they lose their way, or they might have a freeze up moment like you just demonstrated. Uh, and so what we try to show is the many different ways that you can prepare before you ever have an encounter with somebody with whom you're trying to influence, or whatever organization you're trying to influence.
Mhm. There you go. And you talk about several different facets of language, leverage, and leadership, how to utilize them. You talk about how consensus building is something to live with, not something to die for. What's going on in that company if you're dying for it? What's that about?
Yeah, we don't live in a world of absolutes. Although sometimes the political dialogue may lead you to believe that, or the media representation of an issue may lead you to believe that. But really, you're not ever going to get everybody on board with your issue or your proposal, and you really shouldn't be trying to. And to that end, that means there are people that you should be ignoring that may be on the other side of whatever your issue is.
Mhm.
Could be a local uh, uh, commission, city commission, or council, or county government. It could be the big federal government. It could be a specific agency. It could be a business counterpart with whom you're negotiating.
Mhm.
There are people who don't have authority or the ability to make a decision, and so it's easy to say no, and you'll find that many people will say no. But being able to recognize who matters and who doesn't matter is a big part of the game before you ever make the approach.
There you go. And you talk about the scientific and magical contrasts of language. Why is that important in gaining that consensus? Because like you mentioned, consensus is probably a big deal in government because you have people on sometimes two political sides, and you've got to try and somehow figure out a way to get government to work down the middle somehow.
I used to use a phrase on active duty when I was commanding ships, and teaching leadership by actions with my subordinate and team that would be rising to new leadership positions. And I would say words mean things.
Mm.
And so you have to be thoughtful about what you're even saying.
Oh.
And many people have a habit of just sort of thinking out loud and hoping they're going to get to the end of the sentence the way they want to. The comedian Jim Gaffigan has a great little setup on this concept, but too many people think out loud as opposed to thinking and then speaking with authority and with clarity and with brevity. Alan Weiss, who was the co-author, he is a master of language, and has worked very hard throughout his life to develop his vocabulary. And I'm not suggesting that you have to be somebody who drops all sorts of word bombs on people to show how well educated you are, but your words have to be tight, and they have to have meaning in the way that you intend. And ideally, you're going to be able to tell a story with your words in a way that allows people to come to their own logical conclusion, as opposed to you having to sort of beat them over the head or push them into a situation or a corner.
Hmm. And language is important because I think you're always, as a CEO, as a leader, whatever you're doing. I mean, a leader can be a parent. The way you communicate and how you communicate, and its effectiveness is really important. Like, you know, I had to learn that as a leader, where if I told someone to do something in a certain way and they did it wrong, I had to take ownership and go, I probably instructed them wrong, or I didn't follow through to make sure that they fully understood the communication I give them. Many times that was it. There was some sort of failure breakdown in my communication to them. Maybe their level of interpreting data is, might be auditory, kinesthetic, or maybe that, somehow it just didn't fit right to them. And some people need more communication than others. Some people need a lot more, like a pink slip there and thrown out the second story window. But that's another
Chris,
story.
what you just did there was you took accountability for your part of the conversation.
Accountability.
And accountability is a critical part of leadership that is often lacking in the corporate situation.
Mm-hmm.
We know what authority is, and do I have the power to make a decision or to control an outcome? Accountability is the ownership of that decision, and ownership to include, was it somebody 2 or 3 layers down within your organization that was acting on your behalf? Are you accountable to that? In the military, particularly in the Navy, command of Navy ships is the perfect example. A captain has absolute authority within certain boundaries that they have to run the ship by, but they also have absolute accountability. And we see captains of ships relieved every year, probably a dozen or more, for some sort of failure that takes place under their command. It could be some mechanical issue, it could be some procedural violation, it could be a personnel issue, it could be a personal indiscretion, but those shortcomings are meted out through a very strict accountability. And that's a part of uniform military culture. I don't see that as clearly defined and as strongly enforced in corporate America. Oops. I'm not hearing you, Chris.
There we go. That's why we need more people like you and me telling people and teaching leadership. You more better than I, because it's astounding to me. And the more I've studied it and learned about how our military teaches leadership and how we, have the best military in the world, you really see the difference when you see like a war with a different sort of a military structure, management structure per se, in the Russian war with the Ukraine, and what a difference it makes, in the structure, and then being able to have that, where teams can command on the ground or can take command and lead if, there's a breakdown in the chain of command in the theater of war or the fog of war, that a unit can take and act on its own. And so it's really amazing to me how we teach leadership in our military, and how, what a difference it makes in the quality. I think like China is still trying to figure out our perfect model, and I think part of it comes down too to the human will and the human spirit of, what people fight for. I mean, our military and our people in our military, believe in freedom, the American way. There's an idealism there, and you don't see that in Russia with the people, who've been conscripted for that war, where they're just like, we don't want to go do this, we don't care. And it's very different in getting the hearts and minds of the people behind it.
A principal difference, Chris, is that the U.S. soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, guardians, they take an oath to the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And within our military, we see a very robust enlisted force
Mm-hmm.
that also values leadership skills.
Mm-hmm.
And so our enlisted force is able to operate independently within boundaries and within a commander's intent. You don't see that in those other the militaries of the other countries you mentioned.
There you go. And you write about the fundamental difference between accountability and authority. What's the separation between being self-accountable as a leader and wielding authority, I guess?
Yeah, I think self-accountability comes down to, how have you imbued values? How have they been passed to you? What is your understanding of where you are in the organization? There's a certain amount of self-discipline, and we see people fail for personal foibles. It's a Shakespearean concept. It goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years, where sometimes we can be our own worst enemy. But learning how to put an organization or a goal above self is a critical aspect of understanding how authority fits into the overall leadership construct.
There you go. The other thing you talk about in your book that I think is really important in today's world, because even though the world's moving faster, we have these fast talking people that are just trying to close deals fast, not build relationships. And so you talk about people are making unwitting sacrifices need, that are vital needs to gain minor and temporary, bright, shiny things. They're looking for small wins over big wins, and trying to influence fast talk. And you talk about constructing your language that applies within a specific context. Tell us a little bit about how that works, and how to not lose the game over the quick and easy shiny things, and look at the long ball.
Yeah, a comparison might be, and this is not to knock car salesmen, because there are some expert car salesmen who have lifelong customers. There are many car salesmen who don't have lifelong customers and don't stay in car sales as a career because they treat it as a quick sale, and they might bend parameters of the deal to make the quick sale. My day-to-day work in lobbying and exercising influence in government to try to shape better outcomes that will lead to good government requires a long view, in part because it's a long process. The budget process takes as many as 3 years to move through for any given year for a budget to develop. And over time, I will have to come back to the same people sometimes, multiple times over the course of my career. Some people stay put in government for a very long time. And I don't just mean elected officials. We can argue that point about the term limits, but there are unelected experts who sit on committee staffs, who are senior executives within the government. These are people we want there for continuity of government.
Yeah.
But I can't go in there one year with a bag of bolts of a story, and then go in there the next year and say, hey, I've got even a shinier bag of bolts this year. I have to protect my own credibility as somebody who's able to tell a coherent and cogent story. But over time, I can actually become a resource to some of those decision makers who are dealing with new issues about which I may have better connectivity with industry. So two ends of an extreme there in terms of how one can manage the relationships for the longer term.
There you go. I think that you probably have a great perspective on negotiating and leadership and selling, because you're dealing with the ultimate tiger or alligator in the room. Like you said, there is a continuity of people that run our government. Probably thank God for them, because some of the people we put in office are crazy, and we've seen a few. But they're lifelong career people that are there running the Pentagon or running different formats of the federal government and stuff. And you have to go there and not only deal with the politics, but you have to go there and sell stuff, and like you said, build relationships, which is probably just as challenging as any CEO job that has to go do vendor relationships, investor meetings and calls and negotiate with them, and negotiate with unions and all the different aspects, employees, et cetera, et cetera. As a CEO, you're selling to so many people. I've had people say to me, I want to be a CEO because I want to be a boss. And I'm like, you're not really a boss. You're actually in servant leadership, and you're spending your time selling to everybody. You have to sell to your board, your vendors, your employees. You got to sell your vision on everything, what you're trying to do, how to do it, how to innovate, how to build a healthy organization, environment, and culture. You're just constantly selling. Like, people always ask me why I'm a big mouth. It's because from 18, when I started my first company, I've had to sell to everybody who's involved in the. Sometimes I had to sell myself. Like, is this a good idea? I don't think so. I don't know. Maybe we should go sell it. I don't know. We'll figure it out. It depends on which of my personalities, of course, we're running on as well. There's always that kill, kill, kill one that the judge says I can't use anymore. So sometimes it's selling between the personalities. Any of your thoughts on that? And I mean, your experience in selling in that environment in government is probably the highest order that can give us a good read on what to do in business.
Yeah, it's a great great setup, Chris. When I was on active duty, I was one who did not communicate with industry. I couldn't imagine myself ever being in sales. I wasn't really looking outside the lifelines, so to speak. Some of my shore assignments were in Washington, where I represented the Navy to Congress, both the House and the Senate. It's you mentioned at the intro. I led congressional delegations with some pretty well-known individuals around the world. But that gave me some exposure to really the real world of how there are, as I called it, three rings of the circus. Industry, agencies, and Congress all have a role in this. And I came to recognize pretty quickly that many people, industry executives, don't really understand the government customer to which they're selling. They think it's one person, they think it's one service. It's really multiple people across these three rings of the circus. The Congress has a role, the president has a role, the federal agencies each have a legitimate role, and it's recognizing where to play those tensions off one another to get to better outcomes. And that's where I've now learned to engage. And it took me a while to first recognize the condition. I really had it hammered home when I was a corporate lobbyist, and I saw industry executives coming to Washington who thought they knew what they were dealing with, but it turned out they really didn't. And that opened up doors for me to see, hey, I can go help people, and that's what I do now.
And that's leads us into pitching your talking about your other book, Pitching the Big Top: How to Master the Three-Ring Circus of Federal Sales. And let's touch on that a little bit. Let's get a plug in for this book then.
Yeah, it's a bestseller. It was me formulating my thoughts after I left corporate, where I had sort of come to this recognition that there were many companies in the defense industrial base that didn't understand the process, and they needed a simple way to understand it. And the three rings of the circus is not a pejorative term. It's meant to capture the idea of relative motion. So if you think about a circus tent where there's three rings and there's things happening across all three rings at once, that's sort of what you have in federal, except it's happening over the course of 3 years as well. So there's a third dimension to it.
Wow.
And so recognizing how to plug in when and where, right people, right place, right time with the right message. That is a world of nuance that very, very few people understand. And sadly, too few people take advantage of how to participate more fully in the process.
There you go. You've given me a great idea. Maybe we should paint the Capitol of the Congress in a Barnum and Bailey circus colors. We'll just play music every time they start. I mean, I have respect for government. I think a lot of people. I think one of my pet peeves is people do meme politics or understand politics through memes on social media. No one seems to read anymore about what's really going on. And it's unfortunate. I'll meet people that, they'll tell me whatever their perspective is on some aspect of politics going on. And you're like, where the hell did you get that? And you're like, I saw a meme on the thing. And I'm like, you're consuming your ability to contribute to the, this wonderful democracy, that's still an experiment. And you're doing that off of memes. Like, you're making your decisions on voting off of memes. And well, they're funny and cute. I mean, they're shtick. There's some comedy there. It's probably not something you want to base your thing on.
I say, Chris, that one of the casualties of this speed of information and these multiple channels of flow of information, a casualty is truth, in that
Mm,
we no longer have a clear way to recognize what is ground truth.
mhm,
And so it's too difficult to get to sometimes for many people. And if
mhm.
you're only consuming off of social media or headlines or what your drunk uncle said at a party, it's hard to agree on the facts sometimes.
There you go. Do you know my drunk uncle? How'd you know? No, I'm
I
just
think I am that guy now to
kidding.
some of my family.
Everyone's got it. I think it's designated by law that everyone has to have that one drunk uncle. That or he's the one who hugs all the women too much at every
Uh,
Thanksgiving thing. He's the
I'll
handsome.
talk about defense and national security.
There you go. I was just last night. I've been reading the Federalist Papers. I always call them the Madison Papers, so I have to remember not to say that. But the Federalist Papers, and I've been reading. I'm about halfway through. And it's interesting to see the forethought that our founders went into. And then last night I got a little bored of it, and we had C-SPAN on Friday to pitch a series where they have the top 10 books that influenced America, and they turned me on to the book Common Sense by Thomas Paine. And so I'm about halfway through that last night at the gym. And what extraordinary reading, and the vision that people had into what this country is. And boy, if they could see us now.
So, Chris, think about the Federalist Papers and what they were.
Yeah.
So they were, a way to explain to the people what this new government was going to be about and how it might work.
Mhm.
And so they were the then version of a TikTok clip, something
Yeah.
something that was short and digestible in its day, that could help people understand what kind of government would evolve.
Mhm. And the vision behind it was extraordinary. I mean, hearing Thomas Paine talk about, the potential failures of being still attached to Britain. And one of the things that was really profound last night was he makes the play that, um, Britain's an island. We're a continent. Like, why the hell are we messing with them, dude? It's like, we don't need them. We're a continent. And it was really interesting, the perspective of that. I was like, wow, go
But it's
balls out.
interesting that we did recognize, though, that we needed to have lines of engagement with other
Mhm.
countries. So,
Mhm.
ambassadors were designated, and people would take state level messages forward. I would encourage anyone in the audience to remember some of the history. I'm not a history expert, but
Mhm.
we didn't we didn't just get to this magical place we're at in 2023 as we record this, but for those that are inclined to burn the place down because they think that we can do something better, I would just remind that nothing better has been found by any other in mankind to this date.
That is
So,
true.
as challenged as we sometimes are, uh, a lot works right. And I've been to over 60 countries as part of my military and congressional travel. I've watched our senior congressional leaders interact at the ministerial level with partners and allies. And, those relationships really do matter. And you can't just sever them without severe consequences. So I would ask of those that are intensely frustrated about the issues of the day, if you burn the place down, what do you think comes next?
Yeah, and you're going to lose your democracy. I mean, and these things are fragile. Like people don't realize, we're really spoiled here in America. They're like, yeah, well, we always have McDonald's, so I guess the government's always going to be there. And a lot of people want to throw rocks at government, but I tell people, you get the government you vote in, you get the government you deserve. I Tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, because I'm
I
always curious if
Yeah,
I'm
I've
wrong.
written I've written some short blog posts with that exact topic.
Yeah.
We're challenged right now with all sorts of things, fighting for time in the legislative world in Congress at the federal level right now,
Hmm.
and you know you have to have competent people in position to manage these many challenges.
Yeah, and we were joking before the show. The other thing I tell people is you get the government you deserve. So if it's a mirror, our leaders are a mirror to the people, to us as an electorate. So if we're a bunch of dummies putting idiots into office, it's us, man. It's us. It's right there in the mirror. And collectively, we need to be smarter, care what goes on in our government, care about what things are going. Let's get a plug-in for your newest book. Do you have the title cemented? And let's tease
I
that out
do.
a little
Yeah,
bit.
title is cemented. There's an Amazon page there. This comes out in November from Taylor and Francis. It's called "Government Deals Are Funded, Not Sold: How to Integrate Lobbying into Your Federal Sales Strategy."
There you
And
go.
it's fundamentally about recognizing, as the old saw in Washington says, if it's not funded, it's not real. I observe many companies chasing federal dollars in ways that will never find their ways into their company coffers. There's a process. It's a very deliberate process, a very knowable process, but you have to understand how the money flows. And there's multiple aspects to that. I guide people through it. The book is a result of my PhD dissertation that I completed last year that focused specifically on defense executives' perspectives of Congress. And I came to recognize that most defense executives are sort of flying by the seat of their pants. They are using their fairly narrow networks and mentors to guide them along, but they really lack awareness of how the process works in a
Mhm.
deep way. And I can take a line of questioning 2 or 3 layers deep with most defense executives and find that they really don't know as much as they think they know. And it's a shame because it doesn't have to be this way, and it contributes to some of the waste that we see, contributes to some of the decision making that we see. Sometimes we assume people of a certain age or seniority or set of experiences carries with them the similar level of expertise. And
Mhm.
I confirmed that is clearly not the case. Expertise is something very different from experience. So I'm excited about the book. I think any executive could learn from it. You don't have to be in defense, but it's more about how to approach the government more thoughtfully.
There you go. And just approaching probably anybody thoughtfully in negotiations and sales and influence and trying to get stuff done, because that's a lot of what you're doing as a leader. You're trying to influence other people to do their best work. But it's interesting what you talk about, because that leads back to how you talk to people when you go 2 or 3 different levels down. You find that maybe they're not quite as adept, or you mentioned people go to go to government and don't have quite the knowledge base that they need. And you talk about, the shiny things and doing flea market trade-offs, to just strike deals that are short-term, daily basis sort of nuances. Is that kind of the problem with maybe government, where we've just gotten too much on how do we solve things now? Or, there's a small cadre of our people in government that, they're just looking for the headlines and to drive crazy things so they can fundraise off it, and they really aren't interested in wholesome, quality legislation.
What I'll say is what I'm about to say is not a universal. There are some absolute experts in office, in elected office,
Mhm.
who are in defense in particular, are experts in certain areas of defense. On the committees within the House and Senate, there are professional staff members who really are expert, and they know their stuff, and they try really hard to stay as up to date as they're able from that position. Um, that said, there are a lot of empty suits in Washington.
Mm.
There are people who you would think know more than they do, but if you listen to what is sometimes being said, much of it is scripted. Some of that comes from the party ideologies, where there are orchestrated talking points, and
Mm.
just listen to the Sunday shows as an example. If you go from channel to channel, whatever your ideology, you can see exact words and phrases being used repeatedly. And then if you were to engage some of those people in a conversation, you can see that they quickly get uncomfortable with going off script because they don't know the facts in many cases behind what those talking points said. It can be uncomfortable. I recognize it for what it is. I had a captain one time in the Navy who said of our situation, you can try to change it, but it is what it is.
Mhm.
And you have to accept sometimes that it just is. We continue to adapt this experiment of democracy and how it all works, but that sort of change takes place very, very slowly at the federal level.
There you go. So we're coming up on a negotiation, I think, for the budget once again. And if we don't come to some sort of arrangement, we'll be in default. And we already got a negative credit rating recently from a credit rating that hurt our ability to borrow money and what we do, and it doesn't look good. And we don't need another one because, I mean, a lot of people don't realize this country's main thing these days is our ability to back our word, back our money, back our debt, and also the dollar and the power of the dollar bill and how just about everything in the world trades on it. And if we ever lose that, we're kind of screwed, because it seems like it's the last big thing. It used to be housing was a big thing that people would invest in this country and around the world, and we killed that off in 2008. What are your thoughts on the upcoming negotiations for all that stuff and what's going on?
We will get there. It will be ugly, and it will be a bumpy ride.
Mhm.
We have only passed appropriations bills, those that fund the government. We've only passed them on time once in the last 12 years.
Wow.
It's very uncommon for them to pass on time.
Mhm.
The reasons for the disruption vary from year to year. We've had balanced budget acts in 2018, 2021. You name the leader of the House who's tried to make this system work on the House side, and they've been challenged.
Mhm.
Boehner, Cantor, Pelosi. For all her opponents out there, she actually did a pretty masterful job of keeping a disparate group together, at least when it came time to vote.
Mhm.
I think Speaker McCarthy has a challenge on his hands here,
Definitely.
and he, just today we're announcing that we're going to look into an impeachment of President Biden. That's different than bringing an impeachment to a vote, which I don't think could be done successfully. But what these sorts of communications do is just cloud the water and
Mhm.
stir up the muck so that people have a difficult time understanding what's really happening. Uh, Speaker McCarthy came in with the idea that everything was going to pass through what's known as regular order. All the bills would come through subcommittees and committees, be voted on the floor, and then be conferenced with the Senate. So far, that's not happening. He will be challenged to live up to that promise. The Senate, I think, is trying to help him out right now by bringing some funding bills forward. The Senate has, in fact, moved all 12 of its appropriations bills to the floor. They're ready to put some heat on the House, and that should give Speaker McCarthy some leverage to show his more boisterous part of his caucus that, hey, team, that end game isn't going to happen. We need to make a compromise. This will take at least until Christmas, I would predict. Will we have an actual shutdown? A month ago, I would have said no because leadership was publicly committing that they wouldn't. Today, I would say it could happen.
Huh?
But what I tell my clients is, a shutdown means different things. All the lights don't go off. The plants actually do get watered. There are communications that take place. There are people who are essential to government that stay in place, but it's incredibly disruptive.
Yeah.
And the real calamity is that the decision makers are forced to a place of analysis and isolation. They have to wait for Congress to do something before they can decide on the most appropriate course. Long answer, it's actually a complex issue. We will get there. It will be bumpy.
Yeah, and I think we need to all demand as Americans a better system, better leadership, better finding a way to reach across the aisle and stuff like that. Back to the old days, pre Newt Gingrich. The old Tip O'Neill style and things like that, where you try and find consensus, you try and find a way to work together. There's always going to be politics where you sling shit, but when it comes down to legislation or disasters or something like that. As we go out, one last final thought I have on you, because this is really important to me, and I think a lot of people discount it. The U.S. position in the world and our military or lack of military readiness to defend it. Why is it so important? I mean, people are like, we have all these bases on the world. We spend all this money on military. Why is that important? And they just don't get it. So, from your mind and thoughts, what is the summation of why it's important?
Yeah, well, I think when there is not a leader in the globe, that vacuum will be filled, and it's often not filled with positive thoughts. We rely on strategic lines of communication for our supply chains. We can say that they were tested maybe to an extreme during COVID, and we found some things that we didn't like. But fixing supply chains doesn't mean disconnecting from allies and partners. No one country can do this alone. We are in a position of military readiness. It's my belief that we need our intelligence to hold. We need our soft power of diplomacy to be a critical piece of our overall picture, and we need the economic ties. These are traditional tools of policy, in intelligence, military, diplomacy, economics. They all fit together. Our military state of readiness is documented this year by the General Accounting Office, by individual service secretaries, by hearing testimony, by think tank war games. We are not as ready as we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. We have a readiness challenge. And so if those other means fail, we're going to have a problem.
Yeah.
And that problem will definitely strike home.
Definitely. I mean, a lot of us as Americans just kind of believe that what's always been there and the safety net that we have, and we don't understand the what goes into that safety net and keeping that power position in the world. I mean, the China, to my understanding, has built the largest navy now in the world, and I think someone on the show said that they're building their navy at the rate of what Australia is growing at with their navy or something. It's moving at a very fast pace that they're moving. They're of course hacking our leaders. They just hacked one of the State Department people who went over. As she was going over, they hacked her email, which is extraordinary from the moxie of that, or it's just extraordinary to think about. You're like, seriously? But trying to make sure that the Taiwan issue is a big issue with semiconductors. I mean, I think it's 85% or 90% of semiconductors are made in Taiwan.
And that's not something we can change quickly.
Yeah.
It took us a long time for that capacity to grow and congregate at Taiwan. We have a reliance on critical rare earth material that is just not available in the U.S. It doesn't exist in the U.S. So it has to come from somewhere. Much of it actually comes from China, as relates to battery architecture and high-end magnets. Those are just realities of the globe that we have to find better ways to integrate China into the solutions, as opposed to just retreating from them.
Yeah.
This, as I said, and it's no secret, these are complex problems.
Yeah. And people don't realize these are important ones in maintaining the safety of you getting up every day and eating your breakfast cereal and not having it, come to you in Russian or Chinese or North Korea. So
I hope it doesn't take a significant external force to awake us to the reality, but history suggests that it probably will.
Yeah. The one thing man can learn from his history, I always say, is man never learns from his history. And that's why we go round and round. But I think hopefully people will take note of, sadly, the Ukraine war with Russia. I think a lot of people were kind of like, oh, we don't have wars anymore. We don't have to really worry about this stuff anymore. And you can see what's going on over there. And you can see that, if it wasn't for the Ukrainians putting up a good fight, certainly I think the intent from some of the intel was that he was going to go after the NATO countries, and that would have, Finland, Sweden, who weren't NATO countries at the time, it would have crossed some lines that probably would have put us back into a world war or nuclear war, if anything. So the danger still is there, and whether it's a young democracy that is still an experiment that zigs and zags, as President Obama put it, we're still trying to find our footing, and this thing can go at any moment. We saw democracies like Hungary fail over COVID and turn authoritarian. I mean, these things can disappear overnight. We came very close to that on January 6th and may still. I'll give you our final thoughts as we go out. Pitch your books and your wares and your final thoughts and everything.
I'll take two cracks if it's okay. There's a big part of the electorate who has only known a nation at war, and those wars didn't necessarily appear to go our way. And that same part of the electorate is a little bit removed from some of the outcomes of World War II that established this basic world order that we've lived with in, I say, relative peace for over 75 years. So there are many who don't understand what it took to get to that, and that's a shame. I think to the degree that we can preserve that would be very helpful. As you can tell just from the scope of this conversation, Chris, although I help companies achieve great outcomes in Washington and help them bring their products and services to get to a better government solution in whatever the situation is, it requires that I maintain a pretty close understanding of what is happening, with the budget, with the movements of government, what issues are being discussed. All of these issues have depth far beyond the headlines that we see every day, and I try to stay in touch with that so that the clients that I work with don't have to track it so closely, and that they can know that they're ready to participate at the right place and time.
There you go. Well, it's been wonderful and insightful to have you on the show. And people should check out your books from all walks of leadership, because leadership training is something I love consuming leadership books. Give us your.com so people can find you on the interwebs, please.
Sure. GeneMoran.com.
There you go. Gene, thank you very much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
There you go. And thanks so much for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss. Watch for this on the LinkedIn newsletter. Go to TikTok at Chris Voss1, and I think it's YouTube at Chris Voss. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. Order up the book where refined books are sold. You can get $1 Million Influence: How to Drive Powerful Decisions Through Language, Leverage, and Leadership, available now. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you guys next time.